Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Many of us struggle with sales. This could be due to a lack of confidence, lacking comfort, just not wanting to be salesy. We want to help our customers. We know we can, but we complicate the process. This podcast is designed to help folks like you improve at sales through process, practice, framework, and thinking. This is Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. Scott Leese joins me today. Although Scott and I have just recently met, I can confidently say he's a friend and one of the folks who is adding accurate signal to the noise out there around sales. We get into a number of topics, including authenticity, overcoming problems, quick fixes and hacks, loving the grind, and community. Scott's the founder of Scott Leese Consulting and the co-founder of Surf and Sales. He also produces the Surf and Sales podcast. Scott, it is awesome to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Mike. I was just teasing you offline that we picked the wrong time of day for this. We should have waited a few hours so we could be drinking Clase Azul.
We should have waited a couple of hours so that we could do it. And that's an awesome tequila.
They should be sponsoring this episode, actually.
They should be. So Jen, my wife, and I went to Total Wine this weekend. I had to pick up another bottle. I thought I had an extra bottle in my pantry. It was just sitting there, but it was an empty bottle. Go to Total Wine. We go to pick it up. We're in the aisle, and it's relatively expensive tequila. And it's out here. It's $114 a bottle. Used to be able to get it under $100. But Chen looks. She goes, "You're going to pay $114 for tequila?" And so then we had the conversation about how much a bottle of wine costs, how many glasses you can get out of a wine. So a lot of justification. Didn't turn into a knockdown, drag out fight, but yeah, it is good tequila.
Yeah, that's my favorite, and I've got my wife drinking it with me, so I've avoided the conflict around it.
It's awesome. Well, hey, so Andy Rasek was the one who originally connected us, and it was at a time right when the whole COVID thing was starting to really kind of take fire, where we were all kind of getting to this point where we're going to stay at home. And I did a timely topics series, and it was unedited episodes around specific topics. Andy had said we should connect. I got caught up in your wash of LinkedIn connections, and before you did some pruning, you're like, hey, came across here, then we connected, and then we got this thing scheduled. In between then, you actually facilitated a panel discussion for vendor neutral around sales playbooks. So I feel like even though this is the first time we're talking in this context, I feel like we've known each other for a bit of time. So thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, man, I'm glad to be here. It's been fun getting to know you a little bit through not just the panel or LinkedIn, but also some of our Twitter content and banter that we throw around back and forth.
And Twitter's an awesome. What do you like about Twitter?
Now, what I like is kind of the sales community that I'm a part of and maybe building. And that might sound weird because the platform's been around for so long, but my brother is like really up at Twitter. He's like a senior engineering manager or something like that. I think he's like 2 rungs below Jack. And so, we've been like a Twitter family for a really long time. I always used it as like a real-time news network, right? And this is going back, a decade or so, maybe even a little longer than that. But now, it's a pretty vicious place. Depending, you got to be. Actually, it doesn't even matter what you say. Like, you're going to get attacked potentially, and it's full of fake stuff and all this kind of thing. But what's been interesting for me, and I've got a few people on this bandwagon with me now. Some of us who maxed out our LinkedIn connections at 30,000 and have additional followers and whatnot. We kind of like are looking for, a place to expand and kind of grow. And so I kind of was teasing guys like Morgan Ingram and Justin Welsh and some other people I'm blanking on right now. But we're like, all of us have like, a couple hundred followers on Twitter. Like, that's nothing. So maybe we should, pay a little bit more attention to this and see if we can't, drop some of the nuggets that we put on LinkedIn and a little bit more soundbite kind of Twitter style. And so I'm just having fun, like interacting with, guys like you, and been connecting with some sales ladies in the UK, like Alison Edgar. And it's been interesting to just kind of migrate some of that content over. And I use it a little bit as a testing ground, like if I have an idea, I might tweet it. And if it doesn't get any likes or retweets, then I'm like, oh, that would probably suck if I went that direction on LinkedIn. But if it gets a couple dozen pieces of engagement on Twitter, I'm like, I might be onto something there. So
I've not figured out that aspect of the social thing. Like I'm a jackass when it comes to all of this stuff. Like, yeah, if you were to look at my Twitter, I follow 3,000 some odd people and I've got 1,600 people that follow me, which, they would say, hey, your ratios are way off. The reality is I'm not really worried about the 3,000 people that I follow. What I've done is I've curated a network of folks who share information that I find somewhat interesting when I want to dip my toe in. It doesn't mean that I'm going to sit there and scroll for 3 hours and read everything that people are posting. I'm just going to kind of see what the vibe is around things that I'm interested in. And you've got a Liverpool scarf in the background, and spoiler alert, nobody sees video on these things. Scott and I've got our video on just one so I could see his nonverbal, but when I post stuff about the Jets and I post stuff about barbecue and I post stuff about Jeep and I post stuff about sales and learning, and you can really create a really interesting ecosystem network of people with a lot of similar nodes and comments that all kind of relate to each other. And you start to realize in something like Twitter, that's as unfiltered as it is, how similar we all really are at a core, whether we're talking about sales or marketing or learning or ops or HR. So that's one of the things that I really like about that community. Just I'm a huge Twitter fan. That's where I spend more time on Twitter than I do on LinkedIn. I've, again, not figured out the whole LinkedIn thing. I think it ends up being a cesspool of people just pitching and pitching and pitching. But, folks, you'd mentioned Justin, you mentioned Morgan. Both of those guys have been on the podcast before. I know they do some really good things in both of those areas. Morgan's starting to amp up his activity on Twitter, but Twitter and LinkedIn are my two favorite kind of channels.
Yeah. I mean, I've been big on LinkedIn for a long time now. Big meaning like the size of my network and everything. I've been maxed out on connections for years. And I never got caught up in the whole like pitching thing. Like I've never really used it to be social selling in the traditional sense of like, how do I craft the perfect note to Mike to get him to accept my connection request? And then how do I wait 2 or 3 days and like send him the right note and add value, this, that. I was never about that. That felt too much like a game, like a dating kind of game, right? Like, oh, I had a great time with this girl. Like I won't call her for, a week and a half. So she doesn't think I like her too much. Like I don't have time for all that shit, So when I was on LinkedIn, for me, it was like, if I can make my network big enough, then recruiting will become easier for me. And I've opened sales offices and run them simultaneously in San Francisco, Santa Monica, Scottsdale, New York City, Denver, Salt Lake, like all over the place, right? So I'm like, okay, I need to connect with everybody in sales in Phoenix. I need to connect with everybody in sales in Austin. I need to connect with everybody in sales in New York. And so that was how I was thinking of it. I'm going to grow my network. So when I need to hire people, I can just like make a post to LinkedIn and boom, I got applicants. And then what starts to happen is, oh my gosh, I'm not spending any money recruiting. I'm not posting jobs on Monster or LinkedIn or any job board, ZipRecruiter or whatever. And now I can use that extra money, that budget on something else, right? Or now that's an advantage I have when I go to a job interview and the CEO is saying to me like, got some good candidates in the mix for the head of sales role. And I'm like, well, how much do you spend on recruiting, right? Here's what I can bring to the table. It'll be easy for me to get managers, sales operations folks, account executives. So that was how I got started in terms of why I was trying to grow my network. And then I just started sharing stuff that I, went through in my sales career and my leadership career and my life and what have you. I try to be pretty real. I think my personality on LinkedIn is pretty much the same as it is on Twitter. I kid some of these other folks that like, if you network with some of us on Twitter, it's like getting a backstage pass to LinkedIn, because some people are very like prim and proper on LinkedIn and very intentional about, what they say and how they present themselves to the world and what have you. But I don't worry about all that kind of pomp and circumstance. I am who I am. And, I try to share things that I think are interesting and might help people. So there's a lot of value in LinkedIn.
Yeah. Why do you think people try to present this persona? I mean, like, we joked about it during, as the buildup to COVID was happening there. And I say there were just a couple of people that I will just engage with or follow and chat with. if you looked at Twitter, the end of the world was coming. If you looked at Instagram, everybody was on spring break. And, you get that, yet we're still operating in the same freaking environment. So what's the appeal to presenting something different than yourself? And then how do people, and then beyond that, not only what's the appeal, but how do folks reconcile that when they actually work with organizations and get in high stress situations and the real self comes out? Like I have a hard time understanding why people present something different than what they are out in the marketplace.
I'm not totally sure. I work hard to not be one of those people. I've had conversations with people before who have worked for, really recognizable names on LinkedIn and whatnot. And I've had these people say to me, yeah, so-and-so is full of shit. All of the stuff that they write is what should be happening. And what really happens is none of that kind of stuff. I think everybody has an ego, number one. I think everybody's trying to put their best face forward to the world, whether it's, Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or what have you. I think some people, especially in sales, which has been so kind of machismo and like power driven and hungry kind of profession, like people try to present themselves as being untouchable or unbreakable, right? And the fact of the matter is that all of our lives are fucked in some ways, to be honest with you. And the only difference is some of us kind of figured out how to do okay anyways, And I don't know why people don't be more vulnerable and more open about the things that they've been through or they're struggling with, what have you. But for me, that's been one of the things that's been advantageous, I think, to me. I've had a 2-decade-long health struggle now. I spent years 23 to 27 in the hospital for 4 years fighting for my life. I've had 9 surgeries. 4 of them were life-saving. 2 of them were emergency. Got hooked on opioids. I've been through shit, and I still, every day is a struggle. And I think that makes me real. And especially in sales, where so many people come from fucked up backgrounds, and they're just, a lot of us just end up in sales because there's nothing else we can do with ourselves. And I think there's a big audience out there that resonates with others who have been through some hell and made it through the other side. It's like, oh, I didn't have to go to Yale. I didn't have to get a 4.0. I don't have to have a trust fund family or a finance background or what have you, right? I don't know why people act that particular way, but if it works for them, I'm happy for them. But it doesn't work for me.
Well, it's not real. It's not authentic. And and I know a lot of people talk about it, authenticity, be transparent, all of these kind of things. And some people really struggle with the idea of what that really means. And I had friends one friend in high school lost his dad. I couldn't imagine going through that kind of a scenario inside our family, but my family got divorced. So there are other people who couldn't imagine going through that kind of a scenario. You talk about, challenge with opioids and addiction. And there's a reason why I don't go to Vegas. I gambled. I was the guy who was waiting until the end of the night on a Saturday night and betting on Hawaii to try to make things back.
Get it all back. Yeah.
It's dangerous. And, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but we all have these challenges, these things that we're dealing with in one way, shape or form. And when we're hiding those things and hiding those experiences, we're not being authentic. We're not being transparent. We're not actually, I would say, putting our best self forward, which our best self is all of the experience. I mean, there's a reason why I have gray hair. My hairline's going backwards and I've got a crap load of wrinkles on my face. It's not because everything has just been easy. But that's what is it? Iron sharpens iron, or iron hardens iron. Yeah. I mean, these are the experiences we go through. So how do you, let's say someone's out there, they're struggling with this idea of how do I be more authentic, or how do I be more transparent, or how do I just be more open to having conversations with others who are dealing with certain struggles? How can they start? Is there a process that they can go through to start that kind of engagement to help get more comfortable with it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different processes, number one. So my ideas here should not be taken as gospel by any stretch of the imagination. But number one, you've got to get comfortable with yourself. And, that might be kind of heavy, but that's where it begins. I had to get comfortable a long time ago with the fact that my body doesn't function the way other people function. I have to accept that I'm not Superman. And that was hard for me. Like, I was an athlete, my whole life. I played 2 sports in college for 4 years, and all of a sudden I can't do any of that stuff anymore. So finding any support system is really important. That could be a relationship. It could be family. It could be a therapist. I mean, I've gone to therapy for years. I can't even tell you how many years now. All sorts of therapy for just me, for marriage, for parenting, advice, all sorts of stuff. But just getting comfortable with your own shit and your own story and figuring out a way to, keep your self-esteem up, right? That's kind of where it would begin for me. And then I think you move towards and gravitate towards people and places and situations that foster this safety in these kind of discussions, right? So, if somebody comes to work for me as a salesperson or any role, if I'm out there kind of leading from the front in a sense of, people know what I've been through and people know what I'm going through now and whatnot, like, I'm comfortable talking about it and I'm still doing okay, career-wise and what have you. Like, I think that makes it a little safer for somebody else to bring their shit to me. And part of my role as their boss or their leader is to listen and hear them out and, offer ideas and support and solutions if there are any. And if you can, the more people you attract like that, you can create a team inside of a company, or you could create a community, outside of the company, like a little LinkedIn community or a little Twitter community. Or I've been doing this thing with Justin and Amy Volas now this will be our 10th week in a row on Thursday nights. It's called Thursday Night Sales. And this was just like, I can't remember, honestly. I think Justin maybe texted me and was like, hey, do you want to host like a happy hour or something like that? I'm like, yeah, let's do it on Thursday nights and we'll replace Thursday night football. And, we'll just like answer questions from people and shoot the shit. Well, this thing has like become 100 to 150 person strong weekly attendance kind of community where people are open about challenges that they're having in terms of not having a job right now, or finances, or getting grief from their bosses about brand building and how can they do that safely, and anything you can think of, right? So I think it's get comfortable with yourself, kind of try to gravitate towards people and places and communities that offer that safety, where you have the ability to let some of these things off your chest and verbalize it. And that's kind of where I would begin.
And if you're out there thinking, well, how am I going to find a community that does these things or aligns with whatever it is that's interesting to me? You'll find it. You just search and you'll find people who either talk about these ideas on podcasts, they're sharing information in blogs, or they're getting connected inside these groups. I mean, there's the community that Justin and Scott and Amy have built up. And I think you've had Gaetano on there playing music.
He's on every week now, the last couple of weeks, playing music.
And you're just building this thing. You're building this tribe. And there are communities like that are focused on learning and development. And there are communities like that are focused on, I forget Amanda's last name. She's out in New York, marketing person. She and a Juicebox, I forget the names, I'll links, but these people are building these communities. So if you're comfortable looking and you're comfortable engaging with others, you will find that tribe, you will find that community. And that is, the thing that helps us work through all of this together as a society, as a race, as a species, is togetherness, these communities, these tribes. If you haven't read Sebastian Junger's book, Tribe, I'd suggest reading it. It's a really good book. And there's some other great books around some of these themes, whether it's Ryan Holiday's Stillness is the Key or Obstacle is the Way, or some of these other resources that are out there. But you can find a community. You just got to look.
The other thing that I'd offer too, Mike, is if you can't find one, then go fucking build one. Go make one. Right? Like, there was no Thursday night, virtual happy hour. We just built one. We just thought it would be good and a way to kind of give back. So I'm a big fan of, like, it's like this see a need, fill a need kind of philosophy, right? And so if somebody's out there looking around like, man, I can't find this kind of community, well, maybe go start it, because maybe you can be the lighthouse, right? That people, get attracted to and drawn in, and it's very rewarding. One of the best things you can do if you're struggling is to help other people, right? If you're struggling in some way, mental health or even physical health, what have you. Like when you give back and you help people in some way, you really, at least for a little while, gives you some moments of respite from whatever you're going through. And, you feel good about what you've done. So don't be afraid to go build it and start it yourself.
Awesome point. It's if there's someone like you who's struggling with something, expect that there are others who are struggling with the same thing, and they may not be comfortable going out and do it. So by building this community, sharing, then it starts to get momentum. So that's awesome to that you can actually build these things out. I think one of the things that I also heard in there that's important is we kind of think about this, and then in the context of what we do from a sales perspective. You talked about finding a problem, creating a solution, finding a problem, creating a solution. Yet there's so many people who go out there and they create a solution, and then they go out there and they try to find a problem for that. Why is the other side seems so obvious to me, which is, hey, if a problem exists out there and you've got the ability to solve it, go out there and start solving it. Why do you think we fall into this trap of, hey, I'm going to build this thing, this solution, and then I'm going to go out there with my hammer and try to find every nail that sits out there?
Well, I worry sometimes that we are way too focused on ourselves and just selfish. And so I think sometimes we get blindsided, not blindsided, that's the wrong word, we just kind of fall in love with our own cool idea. We get blinded by, oh, this is something I really like and I really enjoy, so everybody else must enjoy it and like it as well. And that's just not the case, I think that is part of it and that happens with salespeople in any sale, any product. How many salespeople do you know, Mike, who pick up the phone and they just instantly start talking to you about what they do and what their solution is and all the features and all that? So this is like one of the fundamental things that I teach not to do, right? You don't just go in and start talking about what you do and what you solve. You have to have an understanding of what's wrong, right? I mean, I wrote this book a couple of years ago called Addicted to the Process that talked a little bit about how I got into sales and my struggle with health and addiction and what have you. And I never had like one of these sales methodologies that really resonated with me. I didn't even study them, to be honest with you. And I ended up just formulating my own, and I married it to the recovery process and the way you get through addiction. And that's find pain, build value, create urgency, discuss solution. It's real simple. When you have an addiction issue, what do? You get somebody to admit they have a problem, right? Well, how many people do you know who have admitted to you they have a problem with alcohol or substance abuse who do nothing about it?
Sure. Yeah.
Tons.
It
right?
happens. Yep.
So it's not enough to just get somebody to admit that they have this particular problem. They have to understand why they should care to fix this particular problem. Right. And even that's not enough. Yep. Right? It could be like, well, I know I got a problem with pills. I know it's not good for me. And I know it's like affecting my body and my mind and things, but I'm still getting by. I still have a job. There's no urgency there. Right. But as soon as you are threatened with if you take another drink, you're going to die. Your family's going to leave you tomorrow if you don't quit using. Now, all of a sudden there's urgency there. Right. And then, and only then can you really get through and talk to an addict about recovery and finding treatment and things like that. You don't just walk up to some addict and say, hey, Mike, I got this kick-ass rehab facility in Scottsdale. It's super fancy. It's cush. You ready to go? You're going to be like, what are you talking about? Right? But we're so focused on ourselves and what we like and what we want to say. And that's just not the right way to go about it.
Yeah. And it's awesome when you see these patterns emerge. Like there's people will call, one of my favorite quotes is the Marie Antoinette quote, which is there's nothing new but what we've forgotten. And there's so much that we can gain when it comes to innovation if we apply things that work in one area and that work in that area to another problem that exists out there. Whether it's the admitting it, identifying pain, having the urgency, and I forget what was the fourth one that you had in there?
It goes find pain, build value, create urgency, discuss solution.
Perfect. So you get this approach, or you go into an approach where you're saying, spin. What was Rackman's situation, problem, implication, need? Or you get into any of these other ones that are out there. The foundational principles behind what compels someone to take some action still apply. I mean, the things that have helped us survive as a species. Donald Miller talks about it in Building a Story Brand. Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that he talks about there is based on the hero's journey, which comes from the legend of myth, or power of myth, which is Joseph Campbell's stuff. And that comes from wherever. So all of these things come together. You don't have to take somebody else's thing. The key is understanding, how do you actually compel people to take action? And one of the ones that jumps out at me is you're talking about that urgency. Who's the one who can create urgency? Like it's
inside of somebody already. So our job is just to unearth it. That's what Perfect. I mean by creating it.
Yep. And that's it. You're revealing it. You're revealing it through questions as things start to go. And there's so many people out there who keep talking about this idea of, well, you got to create urgency. There's one person in my house that creates urgency. She's sitting probably 70 feet that way in the back of the house. And it's when I get a list that says, hey, you've got to do this. There's not a sales rep that's going to come up to me and be like, well, if you don't act now, the price is going to increase, or any of these other kind of bullshit approaches that we take. So it's the questions you ask. It's the thing, the insight that you provide that helps reveal that urgency. I guess why do you think we fall into this trap of, quick fix or shortcuts, or thinking that there's just some secret that if we start doing it, all of a sudden, all of our sales problems are going to disappear, and I'm going to be able to just go in and just start closing business left, right, and center? And like, why do we fall into the trap of the shortcut, quick fix, or silver bullet that exists out there?
Oh gosh, I mean, this is like, I feel like this is wired into our DNA as humans on some level. Like we all at the end, look, I would much rather make more money than I do now, and look better, be healthier, all these things, and work less at it than I do now. I think everybody, if they were being honest, would say that, right? We all would love to have like a hack for all these things, and so we spend a lot of time thinking about these hacks, right? How can I condense 10,000 hours worth of practice into a month of training, a week of training in sales orgs, for example? We're a little bit lazy. I think we're also very creative and trying to come up with ways, and we're optimistic maybe that we can somehow condense 10,000 hours of mastery and get it done in a month and what have you. And I think we are starting to rely on technology maybe too much. All the automation technology and all that stuff. It's great at times, but have you ever walked into a sales floor in the last year and seen account executives who were like pounding the phone the way you and I probably did 15 years ago? The call reluctance from account executives now, who are so used to having SDRs call and make all their appointments from them, is insane. It's unbelievable to me. So I don't know, man. I think it's hardwired in us on some level. I do give us some credit for trying to be creative and like hack things and problem solve stuff, but I don't know anybody who's truly successful who hasn't and still doesn't put in a ton of work.
You got to do the reps, like you said. Like you do the reps. You talk about it, the 10,000 hours. I mean, there's 10,000. If you're not doing the reps, if you're not doing the work, you don't understand the context. You don't understand how you can iterate or how you can adjust in those conversations. You don't know what to do when the thing doesn't work. And one of the questions I like to ask folks is, so if there's some hack or some quick fix or some trick that's out there, and you're a smart person who's been working at this thing for a long time and you've not been able to figure it out, is it because you're stupid? Is it because you're not aware of it? Or is it because of something else? And the something else could be that it just exists. And the thing is, you need to come back and get back to those basics and just do the work, do the reps, but listen and learn. Like these biases are so tough. Like I can tell you, there have been times, even in the last 3 months, where I've gotten into a conversation with someone, and I all of a sudden just fell into the pitch trap, where so excited about the thing that we're working on that I just jump right into it. And I know intuitively that's not the thing to do. Heck, I talk to people about that not being the thing to do, yet you can fall into it because there's this level of optimism and these blind spots that you create. And you're like, yeah, that's not going to happen to me. And then before you know it, you're like, holy crap, I forgot to ask that question, and that question.
Well, we also get, we're human. We also get happy years, right? Also, if you've had a good streak and everybody's buying from you or everybody's saying yes, I've found myself impatient at times to go through my normal process and just like too arrogant and egotistical and just like, oh, Mike's definitely going to buy from me. Like, that's why he called me. So let me just get to the fucking point quicker here. You lose that kind of stuff if you're left unchecked and left to your own devices. So you always got to be thinking about and refining your approach and focusing on these basics. Everybody that I know in the athletic world, at least, and I think this is probably true for business as well, but like, you have to love the actual grind. Like, I used to love going to practice, like literally love it. That would be, when I was in college, like that's what I looked forward to. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't even really care that much about going to parties and all that kind of stuff. I just, when was practice? I'd go to practice an hour early, whether it was tennis practice or soccer practice, both of those sports I played in college. We'd go do stuff early. We'd do stuff late. And, I've heard Tom Brady talk about this before and how, he loves the entire grind of like training camp and the off-season workouts, practices and all this kind of thing. And, been watching The Last Dance and, all those guys on the Bulls, and Jordan talks about this all the time. So that could be another reason why we're always trying to hack it is I think there's a lot of people who are in careers and jobs that they don't fucking enjoy.
Yeah. Right.
So they don't enjoy the process. So of course they're going to look for a hack to get around it. Right. That's another interesting point. I mean, I really like what I do. Do I wish I could hack some of it and condense some of it and get better faster? Yeah, for sure. But, I've been working a lot of hours over the last couple months, a lot, because when I don't know what to do, I go back to the basics for me, which is like, that's the one thing I can control is my attitude and how hard I work and how much effort I put in.
It's awesome. And, you talk about soccer. So if you're watching kids play soccer on a field, 11 kids play soccer on a field in, it might be junior high or high school, you can kind of see the game and you see the mechanics of the game and what's happening. Then you watch that in college or you watch it in British Premier League and it's still kind of the same mechanics. You know what sport you're watching. Yet for some reason, when we get into this, we're professionals, we forget about the fundamentals, the mechanics of the sport that we might have done when we were a kid and get back to basic. And, in football, it's, basic blocking and tackling. There's something you're doing. You're taking a football, you're moving it down a field. Your objective is to get it into the end zone or kick it through some uprights and prevent the other team from doing that at a core level. Yet we overcomplicate things in sales arena or the learning and development arena or in HR when we start to bring in this focus on expertise or specialization or just, quite frankly, I think sometimes we just try to get too freaking creative and overthink things. Yeah. And when we're in problems, the way to address the problem is to create clarity and simplify it. And that's where you get back to the basics and fundamentals. I do want to ask you a question. So as a college athlete who liked the practice or loved the practice or enjoyed the practice, what was it about the practice that you really enjoyed?
The exercise, number one.
Yeah.
Just kind of feeding the endorphins and feeling good about, staying in shape and your body and things like that. And the camaraderie, some of these guys who are on my college tennis team are some of my best friends, still today. And my financial advisor is a college teammate of mine from my soccer team. Like these are, lifelong friendships and whatnot. So the camaraderie, for sure. The competitiveness, and this has been talked about ad infinitum, but, there's such a huge correlation, I think, between success in business and sales and competitiveness, whether you are an athlete or on the, debate team or whatever, but just the competitiveness, I think I would shrivel up and die without competing every single day on something, and I might not be playing sports right now and I might not be working at a company and you and I are sitting next to each other, pounding the phone. I'm trying to beat you and whatnot. But like, with the people I'm close to, we text each other and push each other and compete. You know what I mean? It might send me a text and be like, I just closed a $50,000 contract. I'm going to be like, that a boy, Mike. Awesome. And then I'm going to get off the phone and I'm going to be like, fuck.
I need to go find that. What the fuck's going on?
This guy's pounding me, like I have a leaderboard with some of my buddies that we've been friends for a long time, and it's literally like an income leaderboard.
Yeah.
Like we're competing, trying to push each other and hit certain milestones. And, we have these like we just get together and chat, but it's like almost like a mastermind group. And they're like, we rotate trying to solve problems for each person's business. Like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? So the competition aspect, was really huge for me. And, you find ways to replicate what you love, I think. And, not being able to play sports and losing my entire athletic career due to illness, I've replicated that, getting into sales and being a sales leader and building teams and coaching people and developing talent and putting teams together now in terms of some of the recruiting and sourcing I do. That stuff has stuck with me and will probably always be a part of me.
It's an awesome game because you start to look at all of the different challenges associated with the game and you start to say, hey, there's all of these different variables. And I think the next thing I want to chat a bit about is this community of close folks that come together and push each other. Do they take on the role of maybe like a coach that you used to have back when you were playing tennis, where someone would see that thing that you were doing that you need to just adjust a little bit more so that you can make better contact with the ball? Is that where these smaller knit communities start to play a role for you? And what are your thoughts around coaching and is it an important thing?
Well, to answer your first question, it absolutely helps to be part of a kind of tight-knit or intimate kind of community because you start to know each other really well. And the more we know each other, the more I know how you think, the more I know what kind of buttons to push to make you do something, right? The more I know what challenges and struggles you're going through. So my friends, for example, know that I have lots of ideas, and if I'm not careful, will work myself 24 hours a day. So I have a couple friends whose like job it is to tell me to calm down. So my buddy Richard Harris is like this. Like Richard is like, hey Scott, you need to cool it a little bit.
Cool.
And then I have a couple other friends who are like, dude, you need to go do that. You're dicking around, like thinking about it, right? And then I have another friend who's like, dude, you don't think big enough. Like you should try to, build your brand and business like 10x the size of what it is now, right? So I have like somebody who's trying to get me to chill. I have somebody who's trying to get me to take over the world. I have somebody who's tactically saying, you know what, have you thought about this particular approach? This has worked for me, over at Edward Jones, or this has worked for me. I have another friend who's a district attorney in California, and he was like, have you thought about crafting an argument this particular way? I'm like, fuck, that's really good. So when you have a group of people like that and you know each other so well, it's easier to give like really precise, specialized coaching and feedback instead of, more generic kind of coaching, which might be, or advice, which might be like, Scott, you got a lot of potential. You're really good. Like you should really dream bigger. Like that's fluffy, right? Somebody else might just say, well, you should really, make more calls. Like, well, that's fluffy. Like we've all heard that a million times. Yes. What I haven't heard a million times is, dude, you should absolutely go write this book. And I don't know what's taking you so long. And I'm going to kick your ass if you don't write it in the next 6 months. You need to go start this podcast, Scott. I don't know what you guys are doing, right? And those type of people in our lives are really, really important. And I encourage everybody to surround themselves with people and either find, like we talked about before, either find a community or create one for yourself like this.
And especially now when we're dealing with a lot of the crap that we're dealing with. And just from a timestamp perspective, it's mid-May 2020. Got the pandemic stuff going on. People have been isolating the house. It feels like an eternity. And it's really only been about 60 days. I mean, 60 days ago, my family and I were getting ready to get on a cruise ship. And I know you just canceled a vacation. You've been going back and forth with Airbnb, or at least I see your fourth. I've not heard any of the back. But you go through these situations where you're like, hey, a lot of stuff's changed. We're now in a position where a lot of people left their house to go to work, and they went go to work just to get away from the stuff that's going on in their house. Or they send their kids to school to get their kids out of the house. And now all of that has been thrust together into this operating environment where you might have a big place, you might have a small place, you might be right on top of each other. And now the stress level is just going through the roof. And there are ways, there are tools. Scott and I are talking here via Zoom. Zoom's out there, Hangouts out there. There's multiple resources that are out there that you can use on to engage with others. And you can engage and build a relationship. I've not shaken hands with Scott yet. And I don't know if we'll ever shake hands again. Maybe at some point we'll do a fist bump or something like that. But I've not shaken hands with Scott yet. We've been able to build a level of rapport and have a pretty deep conversation about challenges that we're facing and that he's faced in a way that we wouldn't have been able to do if we didn't have this same kind of medium. If we're just on a phone talking to each other, or if we're going back and forth on Twitter, things aren't going to get as deep. So leverage the tools that are available to you and realize you are not alone. Like you're not alone. You're not on an island. I mean, whether you're the only person in your house or there are a lot of people in your house, you don't need to isolate. You can enjoy conversations with others to take advantage of the tools and resources that are available to you.
And you can push beneath the surface as well. I think sometimes people maybe try to like spark up a little conversation or they comment once or twice, but then it stops, right? Like it's okay to keep it going. And then it's okay to reveal yourself. Like, I don't remember the exact timing of this, but when you and I were first kind of starting to get to know each other, I think you tweeted something about the Jets. And my family is from Buffalo, Niagara Falls, New York. And
where's Buffalo?
Yeah, funny guy.
It's part of New York? I had no idea.
Western New York, the real New York, right? And see, this is my point though. Like, we barely knew each other. He's tweeted something about the Jets, and I'm like, this might be the end of our relationship, Mike. Like, I'm a Bills fan, right? And like, I don't know. I mean, I just took a shot. Like, I'm going to talk a little bit of trash to this guy. Let's see if we can get our relationship to like a different point, right? And then I think I was having a conversation with my brother about Clase Azul on Twitter.
Yep.
And you like chimed in and you had like a cup or something like that, right? And like, it's so simple. I think it's so simple, but I think maybe it's not. It's like unnatural for some people to put their real self out there in a virtual kind of platform. But you can, in fact, put your real self out there. It can be very rewarding. You can do it in a way that is kind of judgment-free, or if you are judged, at least it's like friendly banter. And then these relationships deepen. You and I end up on the same webinar together. We're recording this, podcast together. Who knows what we might do next, right? And, again, like, I don't like people and things where we sit around and kind of complain and do nothing about it. Like, if you don't like something, get off your ass and do something about it, I don't know. I mean, I might have a different perspective because 60 days in quarantine to me is like a joke. All due respect to everybody. Really? I don't mean to say it's like not hard, because there are plenty of moments where it's hard, where my kids are driving me nuts and I'm tired of doing the dishes and all this. But I spent 4 years in the hospital, right? So you think 60 days without being able to go anywhere or without being able to go outside is hard for me? No,
right.
It's not. So
it's an awesome perspective.
My perspective is just different. Like, I can remember getting in the car, driving away from the hospital for like the first time in years, and sticking my head out the fucking window like a dog, because the fresh air smashing against my face while we were driving was like the most unbelievable feeling that I had ever felt. This is like, I was 27 at the time. So this is 16 years ago now. I can still remember sticking my head out the window and feeling that fresh air. Man, we don't like something, we got to do something about it. You don't like your situation, change it. Do something about it. Don't sit and complain about it. You don't have anybody to talk to, go find somebody. You can't have the community that you want, build the particular community. If you're uncomfortable, with the fact that you don't have good relationships, we'll start trying to develop some virtually. Those virtual relationships will turn into, big, powerful relationships one day. Who knows, what could come. So I just think you never know who you might be able to help and who might be able to help you. And so just put yourself out there and damn the fucking consequences. Like, we've all been through something horrible in our lives. Okay. So if we pause for a second and think, well, I already beat this one thing that is probably the hardest thing I'll ever go through in my life. So what is this thing I'm worried about now? Like, it gives you a new perspective and a new approach to just be fearless and not worry so much about the consequences. Like, nothing I go through will probably ever be harder than what I've already been through. So you think the quarantine has me like shook? That might shake me periodically, but I'm not shook.
Yeah.
I got to be a dad. I got to be a husband. I got to be a businessman. I got to find ways to enjoy myself. So that's what I'm trying to do.
You got to move forward. And I mean, like, and whatever it takes. I don't care if it's going and listening to some music or it's reading a book or going for a walk or doing whatever. I've never had that experience where I've been locked in a place for 4 years and then got out of it and was able to stick my head out the window and just enjoy the cool breeze. I know what it feels like when I get in the ocean. I love the water. I live in Arizona. I don't get to see the water that much, but I know the feeling. I know what it's like to just take the top and the doors off the Jeep and drive around. It's 100 degrees out, but the top's off, the doors are off, and there's a freedom that I feel when I drive. And there's a bliss that you can find, no matter what it is, you can find it. And for me, it might be riding a bike and looking at the mountains in the background. For you, it might be putting some headphones on and looking at a picture, or going out and skateboarding, or whatever it is. Find your thing, though, that puts you in that right headspace, because it's out there. And if you don't find it, and I feel like I'm rambling here, but if you don't find it, everything can be so debilitating. And like, it can be all consuming when you start to think about the challenge that's around you is bigger than it really is. And it just becomes suffocating. And I mean, this is where things like Stoicism have really helped me around the idea of control what you can control. The serenity prayer. You go through this process of realizing, hey, there's a lot of shit out there that you just can't control. You cannot control whether or not your customer buys. You cannot control whether or not they show up to a meeting. You cannot control whether or not your manager is out there saying, hey, we need to change the way that we're approaching this thing because of all the stress related to COVID and whatnot. You can't control those things. But what you can do is you can control the interaction. As Scott was talking about, you can control your effort. You can control the questions you ask. Control what you can control and be okay letting some of the other stuff go.
Yeah. I love to say we only control one thing, and that's ourselves. That's it. You control you, and that's it.
I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who think about times when they're out of control. Like, I've been out of control. Like I've had challenges before with ego and loyalty and anger and all kinds of things where you feel like you're out of control. And, if the thing you can control is yourself, the way that you engage, and you let that thing come out of control, go back to Scott's advice earlier, focus on you, get back to you, take care of that you stuff first. And then let's figure out the rest of the stuff. It's kind of like living in this world right now. Tell the kids, let's take care of the house. You take care of your room, take care of the house, take care of the neighborhood, take care of the community, take care of the state. The rest of this stuff will kind of come together. And don't worry about what folks at the federal government are saying about this and any of the other noise that's out there. Let's control the things that we can control. Not only can we not control it, right now I don't feel like we've got a lot of influence on that kind of stuff. Scott, this has been awesome. Thanks for doing this. I'm really happy. I haven't picked up a British Premier League team. I've followed Spurs a little bit. I know, people have said, Chelsea's a good fan. I know you've got the Liverpool stuff in the background. Maybe that will be the compelling event that gets me to go that way. But I am definitely not going to follow the Bills. That just won't happen. That'd be like me saying I'd follow the Patriots. I mean, that's the thing I think we can agree on. We both probably have a dislike for the Patriots.
That's an understatement, but yes.
Okay. And we're probably both not Dolphin fans. Like,
that's also correct. So
there's this common ground that even Jets and Bills fans can find out there. Scott, thanks for doing the podcast. Really enjoyed the conversation. Where can people find out more about what you're working on, what you're doing? And we'll include links to the podcast that you've got and things like your LinkedIn profile. But where do you want to send people?
Yeah, I mean, just on an individual basis, people should definitely look me up on LinkedIn. Just even though I'm maxed out on connection requests and I get a lot of messages there, it's part of my routine to respond to every single message. So I encourage anybody to reach out to me there. You can find out more about what I do as far as business at scottleaseconsulting.com, as well as surfandsales.com. These are the two businesses that I run. And I think everybody can agree that when this is all over and we're free to travel, we're ready to go surfing and talk shop and whatnot. So look at surfandsales.com if you're looking for a cool event to kind of combine a vacation as well as learning opportunity. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I also host my own podcast, the Surf and Sales Podcast, with my friend Richard Harris. So and we'll try to get
and
you on.
We'll include links to there. And then also, if you follow Scott and Justin and Amy on Twitter or LinkedIn, you'll see the Thursday night event. And it's not just for salespeople. I mean, these are all life conversations that we're all having, and people will get value out of it. And you kind of see what happens when a tribe of people just starts to build and build and build. So Scott, thanks again for joining.
Yeah, man, I enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Scott, thanks. That was an awesome conversation. Please check out Scott's work. I'll include links in the show notes. If you know of someone who'd benefit from hearing this discussion, please share it with them. Let us know via Twitter or LinkedIn. I'd like to hear how you're applying the lessons learned and concepts we've discussed in your role today. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?